Welcome back to the deep dive. Today is January 18th, 2026. And I want to start by asking you to just check your mental calendar for a second.
hmm
If you rewind just 3 years back to those, heady days of early 2023, the whole world was completely obsessed with chatbots.
Oh, completely. It was all ChatGPT.
It was all, write me a poem, or can you debug this little piece of code for me? It felt novel. It was fun.
It was the toy phase. I
Yeah.
think that's the best way to put it. The toy phase of the AI revolution. But, sitting here now in 2026, the toy phase it's decidedly over.
Completely over. We are so far beyond that now. We're not talking about, little features on an app anymore. We are talking about national security. We're
Right.
talking about cultural identity. And frankly, we're talking about survival in a digital ecosystem that has become, well, incredibly predatory.
That is the shift, isn't it? The whole conversation has moved from, hey, what can this cool bot do, to, wait a minute, who actually owns the brain that this bot runs on?
Exactly. Who owns the brain? And that brings us to the word of the year. I mean, it might be the word of the decade. Sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
We're looking at a world map where the digital borders are being drawn in, like real time, right in front of us. You've got the Silicon Valley behemoths, your Microsofts, your OpenAIs, the Googles, and they're acting, for all intents and purposes, like digital empires.
They are. They are the new colonial powers, in a sense.
And then you have the rest of the world just trying to figure out, okay, are we going to be customers or are we going to be colonies?
It's the defining tension of our time, especially for the global south. And that's why today's deep dive is so fascinating, because we're looking at the one player, the one country, that really seems to have cracked the code on how to resist that colonization.
We're talking about India.
We're talking about India, and specifically a company called Sarvam AI.
Sarvam AI. Now, for those of you who haven't been tracking the Bangalore tech scene religiously, Sarvam is not just another, thin wrapper around GPT-4.
No, not at all.
They are building what they call sovereign AI. And the arc of this company is just, it's staggering. I mean, they went from a stealth startup in late 2023 to, as of this month, partnering with the government for a $1.2 billion sovereign AI park.
That trajectory, a trajectory like that tells you everything you need to know about where the internet, where global power is heading.
It's incredible.
But I think we need to be really careful here not to just paint this as, another success story about a startup getting rich.
Oh, it's much bigger than that.
It's way bigger.
Yeah.
This is about rewriting the entire architectural playbook of artificial intelligence.
Right, because the standard playbook, the one written in Silicon Valley, is, well, it's simple, right? You buy 1 million NVIDIA H100s, you burn $10 billion worth of electricity.
And you train a model on the entire English-speaking internet.
Exactly. Sarvam couldn't do that. They just flat out did not have the cash or, frankly, the energy grid for that kind of brute force approach. So they had to be smarter.
They had to be efficient. And that necessity, that constraint, it bred a kind of innovation that, frankly, we just aren't seeing in the West because they don't have to.
So today we're going to unpack all of that. We're going to get into their tech things like OpenHathi, their voice models, the whole Hinglish breakthrough, which is fascinating.
But I have to say, the part I'm most excited to get into is the paradox at the very center of this entire story.
The global paradox.
Yes, this counterintuitive idea that to be truly sovereign, to truly protect and serve India, Sarvam might actually have to become a massive global exporter of its technology.
It's the Robin Hood model of AI. I love it. We will definitely get there. But let's ground this first. Let's start at the beginning. Who are these guys? Because like you said, in 2023, nobody knew the name Sarvam.
Well, the ecosystem knew the founders. That's the key. We're talking about Vivek Raghavan and Pradesh Kumar. And they were not your typical, I dropped out of Stanford to build a crypto AI hybrid type of founders.
No, these were serious people.
Very serious. They were deep in the academic trenches at IIT Madras for years.
Specifically at a lab called AI for Iraq, right?
Correct. And that distinction is absolutely vital to understanding their whole philosophy. AI for Hurit was this research initiative dedicated to Indian language processing years before ChatGPT made it cool.
So they were working on this problem when nobody else cared.
Exactly. They were dealing with the messy, complex, multilingual reality of India when everyone else in the world was just focused on optimizing for English benchmarks.
So when they finally founded Sarvam in July of 2023, they weren't They weren't really starting from scratch, were they? They were basically commercializing a decade of hard-won research.
That's it. And it shows. They came out of stealth mode in December 2023, and they didn't just have a prototype. They had $41 million in funding.
I remember the headlines. People were shocked. $41 million for a seed in Series A in India for an AI company that was just unheard of at the time.
It was a war chest. And look at who was writing the checks. You had Lightspeed, PeakXV, Kozlov Ventures. I mean, these are top-tier global VCs.
Right. These investors don't throw that kind of money at a science fair project.
No. They saw that the sovereignty pitch wasn't just, feel-good nationalism. It was a business moat. It was a defensible long-term strategy.
Okay, so let's drill into that concept then. Sovereignty. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, especially by politicians. But in a technical sense, what were they actually pitching to these VCs? What does it mean?
My understanding is it comes down to what you could call the black box problem.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. If I'm the State Bank of India, or the Indian military, or even just a hospital system dealing with patient data, do I really want to pipe all of my most sensitive information into a black box model that's physically hosted in, like Oregon or Virginia?
Probably not. You have no idea what's happening inside that box or who has access to it.
Precisely. So it's about data residency, that's part of it, yes, but it's really about dependency. Think about the geopolitical climate. If the U.S. government, for some reason, decides to put export controls on AI inference tomorrow.
Which is not impossible to imagine.
Not at all. And if your entire national banking infrastructure relies on an API call to a server in San Francisco, you are quite literally dead in the water.
So sovereign AI isn't just, hey, we built it here. It's, we control the kill switch.
It's full stack control. It's owning the compute, owning the model weights, owning the training data, and controlling the fine-tuning process. It's the difference between renting a really nice house and owning the land it's built on.
I like that analogy. Okay, so they have the philosophy, they have the money. Now let's talk about the execution. Early 2024, they dropped their first big project, OpenHathi.
And the branding was just perfect. Hathi means elephant in Hindi.
Right. Big, strong Indian, never forgets. It's great.
And it was a direct shot across the bow at the llama models coming from Meta. But technically, branding aside, OpenHathi was a revelation.
Yeah.
To understand why, you have to understand the core problem with standard Western LLMs when they try to process Indian languages.
This gets into the tokenization issue.
Right? Let's break that down for everyone because it's so important. Tokenization is basically how the AI chops up words and sentences before it can process them.
Okay, so it's the first step.
It's the first step. Now, an English native model sees a word like apple, and it treats it as one single unit, one token. Very efficient.
Makes sense.
But if you feed that same model a word in Hindi or a phrase in Tamil, the Western tokenizer, it doesn't recognize the script structure. It has no idea what it's looking at. So it just smashes the word into like 4 or 5 meaningless byte fragments.
Whoa, wait, so does that mean it takes 4 or 5 times the compute power just to process the same amount of information?
That is exactly what it means. It's incredibly inefficient. It's incredibly expensive. It's like trying to read a book where every single word is systematically misspelled. The AI has to waste so much energy just figuring out what the word is before it can even think about the meaning.
It's like a built-in tax on non-English languages.
It's a huge tax. And OpenHathi fixed it. They built a new tokenizer from the ground up. They expanded the model's vocabulary to include Indic scripts natively. So the model sees a Hindi word and understands it as one token.
So even though OpenHathi was a much smaller model compared to something like GPT-4, it was punching way, way above its weight class on Indian language tasks.
Because it actually understood the alphabet. It seemed so basic, but it was revolutionary.
It feels like the David and Goliath moment for them.
It really was.
Yeah.
They proved that a smaller, carefully curated model with a native tokenizer could absolutely outperform a massive brute force Western model on its home turf. It was like giving Indian developers their own compass that actually pointed north for them, instead of one that just vaguely gestured towards California.
And that just set the stage for the real heavy hitter, which came in May 2025. They released Sarvam-M.
The M officially stands for a few things, but technically, it was their medium-sized workhorse model, 24 billion parameters.
Okay, so let's put that in perspective. Here in 2026, we're hearing about trillion parameter models being trained. So 24 billion. It sounds almost quaint, but I have a feeling you're going to tell me why the size didn't matter here.
Well, size always matters a little bit, but efficiency matters so much more. And 24 billion is actually a very clever sweet spot.
How so?
It's small enough that you can run it on reasonable, accessible hardware. You don't need a state-sponsored supercomputer, but it's just big enough to have sophisticated reasoning capabilities. But the real breakthrough with Sarvam-M, the thing that made everyone sit up, it wasn't the parameter count. It was the Hinglish capability.
Ah, yes. This is my favorite part of the story, because as someone who lives on WhatsApp, I know for a fact that basically nobody in urban India types in formal, pure Hindi.
Nobody. Doesn't happen.
It's all this mix. It's Roman script, but Hindi words mixed with English words. Sentence like, Kaho hi, bro. Scene kyu hi.
That is the absolute nightmare scenario for a traditional AI model. It is designed to fail at that task.
Why? What does it see?
It sees Kia, and its programming says, is that an acronym? What does KYA stand for? It sees bro and thinks, okay, that part's English. It sees scene and gets completely lost because the context is neither purely Hindi nor purely English. It just gets confused.
It can't handle the code switching.
It can't. Sarvam-M, however, was trained specifically on massive data sets of this real-world, messy, code-switched data. It understands that languages in India aren't these neat, separate silos. They're fluid streams that constantly mix and flow together.
That feels like a massive technical hurdle to overcome. I mean, trying to predict the next token when the language itself might switch 3 times within a single sentence, that requires a very different kind of training, a different probability map.
It does. And the benchmarks proved it worked. Sarvam-M showed I think it was a 20% improvement on Indic language tasks over the base Mistral model that it was derived from.
Which is a huge leap.
A huge leap. But here is the kicker. This is the part that still fascinates me. It also showed a 21.6% gain in math problems and a 17.6% gain in programming tasks.
Wait, hold on. Why on earth would an Indian language model get better at math? That doesn't make any sense.
It seems counterintuitive, right? But what the researchers believe is that language structure directly correlates with logical structure. By training the model to handle the complex, high-context, rule-bending nature of how Indians actually speak, they inadvertently improved its general reasoning capabilities.
So mastering linguistic complexity made it a better logical thinker overall.
It's a fascinating side effect of embracing, rather than ignoring, linguistic diversity. It made the model smarter in ways they didn't even anticipate.
Yeah, that is wild. But we can't skip over the hardware optimization side of things. I saw the term FP8 quantization in the show notes. Now, I know that sounds like something out of Star Trek, but my understanding is that it's basically a way of making the model lighter, for lack of a better word.
That's a great way to put it. It's really about math precision. So normally, computers and AI models do their math using what are called 32-bit or 16-bit floating point numbers.
So very, very precise calculations.
Extremely precise,
Yeah.
which is great for accuracy, but it also means it uses a lot of memory and a lot of compute power. FP8 means doing all that math with just 8-bit numbers. It's much, much coarser.
Okay, but doesn't that make the model dumber? I mean, aren't you losing critical detail in those calculations?
That's the risk, and that's why it's so hard to do. Usually, if you just drop a model down to FP8, its performance falls off a cliff. It starts making errors. It starts hallucinating. The genius of what Sarvam's team figured out was a way to calibrate and fine-tune the model so that they could run it at FP8 with almost negligible loss in accuracy.
And the benefit of doing that is
2 times faster inference
twice as fast.
at half the cost.
Half the cost. Okay, now that is the magic phrase. Because if your mission is to serve 1 billion people, and a huge chunk of them are in rural areas with spotty connectivity and very low disposable income, you cannot afford to have a 10-cent query. It's just not viable.
Exactly. If you want AI to run on a $100 smartphone in a village, you need FP8. You need that insane efficiency. This is what I meant earlier when I said that poverty of resources drives a different kind of innovation.
Right. Silicon Valley didn't need to solve the FP8 problem as urgently because their answer was always just buy more GPUs.
Just throw more money and more energy at it. Sarvam had to solve it. It was an existential requirement for their business model to work.
Which is a perfect segue into their next major release, which was Sarvam 2B in late 2025. A 2 billion parameter model. I mean, that is tiny by today's standards.
Tiny. That can almost fit on a smartwatch.
So what's the point of that?
It fits on the edge. That's the entire goal. The future isn't about every single query going back to a massive server farm in a data center. It's about having powerful intelligence running locally on your device.
For privacy, for speed, for offline capability?
All of the above. And Sarvam 2B, even though it was small, it was trained on an incredible 4 trillion tokens of data. It's incredibly dense. It was really India's first fully homegrown small language model designed for mass deployment.
But, all of this back-end tech, the quantization, the tokenizers, the parameter counts, it's all useless if people can't actually use it easily. And this is where I think Sarvam made their smartest strategic bet of all. They basically ignored the standard text interface.
They didn't ignore it completely, but they correctly identified that it wasn't the primary vector for reaching the next 500 million users.
Yeah.
They went voice first.
Because of what they call the typing barrier.
Right. Let's just look at the demographics for a second. You have incredibly high smartphone penetration in India, thanks to ultra-cheap data plans from companies like Jio.
So almost everyone has a screen in their pocket.
Almost everyone.
Yeah.
But digital literacy, the actual ability to, navigate a complex UI, type accurately on a tiny QWERTY keyboard, manage drop-down menus, that is still a massive barrier for hundreds of millions of people.
Especially if you're trying to type in a complex index script like Malayalam or Telugu on a 5-inch screen. The digital keyboards are they're a nightmare to use.
They are. So Sarvan's insight was simple but profound. They said, why are we trying to force 1 billion humans to learn how to type for a computer? Let's just teach the computer how to listen.
And so they built Sarvam agents.
Exactly. These are voice-native bots that live where the users already are, inside WhatsApp and on simple phone calls. No app to download, no account to create.
And the scale they achieved is just staggering. I saw a number something like 50 million weekly active users by the end of 2025.
50 million. That is the entire population of South Korea talking to Sarvam's models every single week.
And look at who the clients are. This isn't just for, ordering pizza. It's UIDAI, the organization that runs Aadhaar, the national ID system.
It's NITI Aayog, the government's main policy think tank.
Yeah.
The Ministry of Skill Development. These are mission-critical, public-facing government services.
So you can imagine a farmer, say, in a village in Bihar. He needs to check the status of his government subsidy. He doesn't have to find a computer or download an app, create a login, and type a query.
No. He just calls a number. And he asks in his own dialect, in Bhojpuri, where's my money?
And the bot answers. But it doesn't sound like a robot, right? This is where their other piece of tech, Bulbul, comes in.
Bulbul is their generative voice engine. And the key differentiator here, the thing they obsessed over, is emotional intelligence.
What does that mean in this context?
We tend to overlook this in the West because we're used to Siri and Alexa, which sound very flat and robotic. But in a high-context culture like India, the tone of voice, the intonation, carries so much meaning. Bulbul can adapt its tone. It can sound empathetic if someone is reporting a problem. It can sound authoritative if it's giving official information. It can even adapt to different regional accents.
I remember the big demo they did for this. It was with the Prime Minister's podcast interview.
The one he did with Lex Fridman.
Yes, a long hour-plus interview, all in English. And Sarvam took it and dubbed it into 9 different Indian languages. But it wasn't just a simple dub. It was stunning. It sounded like his voice with his specific cadence and pauses, just speaking fluent Tamil or fluent Hindi.
That was the Sputnik moment for Indian content creators and media. It was this sudden, shocking realization that the language barrier, it effectively doesn't exist anymore technologically.
It just flattens the entire information hierarchy.
Completely. If you have a brilliant idea in English, it's now instantly accessible to someone in a Tamil village. And just as importantly, if you have deep, ancient wisdom that only exists in Marathi, it's now accessible to the English-speaking elite in Delhi.
Okay, so just to recap, we have the software, the highly efficient models. We have the voice-first interface that people are actually using at massive scale. But software still needs a home. And in January 2026, just this month, Sarvam announced they were building it a mansion.
A palace, even.
Let's talk about the Sovereign AI Park announcement.
This is the moment Sarvam pivots from being just a startup to being a national institution. They announced a partnership with the Tamil Nadu government.
In Chennai.
In Chennai. And they're putting in 10,000 crore rupees. That's 1.2 billion US dollars over the next 5 years. They are building a dedicated AI campus from the ground up.
So I have to play devil's advocate here for a minute. We just heard Sam Altman is trying to raise $7 trillion for chips. Microsoft is spending $100 billion on a single supercomputer called Stargate. In that context, is $1.2 billion actually enough? Or is Sarvam just bringing a knife to a nuclear war?
It's a very fair skepticism.
Yeah.
And if you're measuring by raw FLOPs, by raw floating point operations per second, then no, 1.2 billion does not compete with Google's total global compute power.
Right.
But you have to remember the efficiency argument. Sarvam isn't trying to build a model to simulate the entire physics of the universe. They are trying to run efficient, targeted, low-cost inference for the specific needs of India.
So that 1.2 billion goes a lot further because they aren't wasting it on inefficient models and tokenizers.
Exactly. And more importantly, it's about strategic independence. The park isn't just a building. It includes their own dedicated data centers with their own GPU clusters.
So they don't have to rent from AWS or Google Cloud.
They don't have to. It's their hardware. And they'll likely use NVIDIA, but they're also exploring ways to diversify their hardware to reduce that vendor lock-in. The park also includes an Institute for AI in governance.
Which sounds like a training ground for the country's bureaucrats.
It is. And you know what? That's absolutely crucial. You can't have effective AI governance if your government officials don't understand what a parameter is or what training data means. They are building the human capital alongside the silicon.
The whole press release framed it as India's own Mount Olympus for AI. A little bit dramatic, maybe?
A little, yeah. But think about the alternative. If they don't build this, India's entire AI future lives in a rented apartment on Amazon Web Services. And the landlord can raise the rent whenever he wants.
Or evict you.
Or just evict you entirely. This is about building a permanent sovereign residence for their digital future.
And this was all part of the government's Indie AI mission, right? They
Yeah.
were selected for that.
They were. That happened back in April 2025. The government put out a call for proposals to build India's first indigenous foundational LM. They got 67 proposals.
And Sarvam won.
They won. Their mandate is to build these models specifically for governance, healthcare, and education. So the AI park is the physical manifestation of that government mandate.
Okay, this brings us to what you called the most intellectually juicy part of this whole story, the global paradox.
Yes.
Because everything we've said so far, sovereign AI, local languages, government parks in Chennai, it all screams internal. It screams in India, for India.
It's a fortress mentality, right?
Yeah.
Build the walls high.
But the business reality and their actual strategy is the complete opposite. You made the argument earlier that to save India, they have to sell their technology to the rest of the world. Unpack that for me. Why?
It comes down to two fundamental things: capital and applicability. Let's start with applicability because it's easier to grasp. The incredibly difficult problems that Sarvam had to solve out of necessity, things like handling code switching, supporting low-resource languages, building voice-first interfaces, achieving high efficiency on cheap hardware, those are not just Indian problems.
No, they're global South problems.
They're human problems. I mean, look at Africa. Nigeria alone has over 500 languages. They use messy, mixed-up dialects just like people do in India. The big clean models from California don't work well there at all. Sarvan's tech stack works perfectly there.
So they can essentially export the Indian playbook.
Exactly. They can go to the government of Indonesia or Brazil or Nigeria, and they can say, hey, we have a solution that is 10 times cheaper than calling an OpenAI API, and it will actually understand how your people really speak.
That's a powerful sales pitch. But here's the part of the research that really blew my mind. They aren't just looking at the developing world. Their sales deck is targeting New York City.
It is. The global north has a dirty little secret. It is incredibly inefficient at handling its own diversity.
I saw the numbers you sent over. New York City spends, what was it, something like $267 million a year just on healthcare translation services?
Yes, $267.6 million every year. Because they're relying on armies of human translators or clunky, expensive legacy services. New York has to create documents in over 800 different languages.
And Los Angeles spent $3.3 million just to print multilingual ballots for one single primary election.
It's wildly inefficient. It's a massive, massive drain on public funds. And now, here comes Sarvam. They can walk into the New York City mayor's office and say, we have a voice-first, emotionally intelligent AI that can handle all 800 of your languages with higher accuracy for a tiny fraction of that cost.
So in this bizarre twist of fate, the technology that was developed to serve the poor Indian farmer is actually the premium, superior solution for the rich American city.
It's the classic innovator's dilemma. Constrained environments breed more elegant, efficient solutions. And now, Sarvam gets to arbitrage that innovation. They can earn high-margin dollars in New York and London and San Francisco.
Yeah. And what do they do with those dollars?
They bring them home. They buy more GPUs for the Chennai park. They use that foreign revenue to subsidize the cost of AI for the Indian farmer, for the Indian student.
It's a virtuous cycle, but it's also a necessity, isn't it? I mean, if they don't get access to that global capital, can they really keep up with the pace of innovation?
I don't think so. The pace of AI development requires burning cash at an astonishing rate. If Sarvam had to rely only on Indian government grants or rupee-denominated revenue, they would eventually fall behind. They need the dollar revenue to defend their rupee sovereignty.
That is the paradox in a nutshell. You have to go global to protect what's local.
It also protects them from what you might call the poverty of ambition. If you only ever look inward, you tend to benchmark against yourself. But if you're out there competing for a contract in New York, you're benchmarking against whatever GPT-6 is. It keeps the engineering team incredibly sharp.
So let's look at the roadmap. We are sitting here in January 2026. The park has just been announced. What happens next month?
February 2026 is the big one. That's the scheduled launch of their 120 billion parameter foundational model.
That's the big boy. That's the flagship.
That's the flagship. It's been trained on 17 trillion tokens of data. And crucially, somewhere between 17 and 20% of that training data is specifically Indian data Indic languages, cultural texts, legal documents, all of it.
That is an order of magnitude more Indian context than any other model in existence.
By far. And here's the other key part. They're planning to open source it.
Really? They're not going to keep it proprietary?
No, the plan is to release it under very permissive licenses. They don't want to be the only AI company in India. They want to be the platform. They want other startups to build on top of their foundation. They want it to be the Linux of India.
There was one other acronym in their roadmap that I wanted to ask you about. RL as a service. What is that?
Ah, yes. This is really important from an ethics and culture perspective. RL stands for reinforcement learning. It's the final crucial step of training an AI where you essentially teach it manners. You have humans who rate its responses, and you teach it what is helpful, what is harmful, what is biased, what is polite.
And usually this is done by a bunch of underpaid contract workers in Kenya clicking buttons for OpenAI, right?
Correct. And those workers are following a very long, detailed set of guidelines written by engineers in Silicon Valley. So naturally, the model ends up learning a very Western, specifically Californian, set of moral and cultural values.
It learns that individualism is generally good and maybe collectivism is less good, implicitly.
Exactly. Or it learns about American social norms. So an Indian model trained that way might end up giving advice on a family matter that feels very American and very wrong for the local context.
So what Sarvam is doing is different.
They are launching what they call public RL as a service. They are building a platform to invite the Indian community academics, sociologists, religious leaders, even just regular citizens to participate in that feedback loop.
So they're effectively crowdsourcing the model's ethics and values.
They're aligning the model to Indian cultural values, not just translating English into Hindi. So if you ask this new AI a question about, say, respect for one's elders, or how to handle a community dispute, it will answer from a uniquely Indian cultural context, not a Western one.
That is such a subtle but incredibly powerful form of sovereignty. It's not just about where the data is stored. It's about what values are encoded in the intelligence itself.
It is the ultimate layer of control and identity.
So let's zoom all the way out. We've covered the tech, the money, the infrastructure, the politics. If you had to summarize the entire Sarvam story as it stands today in 2026, what's the one-line headline?
I think the headline is that the old victim narrative of the Global South is officially dead. For decades, the story was that technology happens in the West and is then done to the rest of the world.
They were just consumers.
Right. Sarvam has proven that foundational, world-beating, cutting-edge technology can be built in Bangalore, optimized for the constraints and realities of the majority of the world's population, and then be sold back to the West as a superior product.
It's the fundamental shift from being a consumer of technology to a creator of it.
And from a position of dependency to one of dignity.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought, something that really struck me while we were discussing that global paradox. If Sarvam succeeds, if they actually manage to export this Indian playbook, this tech stack to Nigeria, to Brazil, to Indonesia, are we looking at the beginnings of a new kind of alliance?
A Global South AI alliance.
Exactly. I mean, imagine a world where the internet for the next billion users isn't built on a foundation of American English text. Imagine it's built on a mesh of sovereign, voice-first, multilingual models that are all interoperable and talk to each other.
It would fundamentally fracture the monopoly that the Silicon Valley giants have enjoyed for 2 decades. It would create a truly multipolar digital world.
And honestly, a multipolar world sounds a whole lot more resilient and a lot more interesting than a monopoly.
It certainly does. The next few years are going to be fascinating.
We will be watching that February launch very, very closely. Thanks for unpacking all of this with me.
It was a pleasure.
And to our listeners, whether you're reading this, typing this, or speaking to it, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next deep dive.